The valley looked exactly how I remembered it, yet eerily different at the same time. The winding dirt road was half overgrown with weeds, pine trees arched overhead like old guardians, whispering secrets in the wind, and the scent of wet earth clung. To the air I had not been here in over a decade, not since my grandfather passed away, and left me the old cabin and a piece of land so vast it stretched beyond the hills. My life had carried me elsewhere, chasing city jobs and apartments, where the walls felt like cages, but something in me always missed this place. The silence, the freedom, the way you could breathe without hearing car horns or HOA rules echoing in your ear. I pulled up in my dusty truck, the same one I used to drive when I was younger, and stepped out onto the gravel drive. The cabin looked worn but strong, a little weathered like an old soldier standing its ground. I smiled because this was mine, not just the cabin, but everything around it, every ridge, every tree, every stream flowing through the valley. My grandfather had once told me, "Never let anyone make you forget what's yours. This land has more history in it than the people who try to control it." I didn't know what he meant back then, but I was about to find out. As I started unloading my gear and preparing to clean up the cabin, a sharp screech cut through the quiet. A shiny black SUV rolled up, dust swirling behind it, and the door slammed open. Out stepped a woman in her late 40s, perfectly pressed blazer pearl earrings and the kind of sunglasses people wore when they thought they owned the world. Her walk was fast-clipped heels, striking the gravel like hammers. She looked me up and down, then crossed her arms. "Excuse me," she said, voice sharp as glass. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm unloading my truck. This is my cabin," she scoffed. "Cabin? This entire valley falls under the jurisdiction of the Homeowners Association. I'm the president. Karen Williams. You can't just park here without clearance. Didn't you see the sign at the entrance?" Her words hit me like thunder. I almost laughed. "The HOA thinks they control this." She didn't know. "Not yet." "Actually," I said slowly, "my grandfather owned this valley and he passed it to me. I have the deed to the entire property." Her sunglasses lowered just enough for me to see her eyes widen, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "That's impossible. No single person owns all this. The HOA has governed this area for 20 years. If you think you can just walk in here and claim it, you're in for a rude awakening." Her arrogance made me grit my teeth, but I stayed calm. I wasn't about to let her rattle me. If there's one thing Karen types hate, it's being proven wrong, and I had the paperwork to back it up. I carried a box into the cabin and called back over my shoulder, "You might want to check your files again, because the only law that applies here is the one tied to my deed. And last I checked, I never signed anything with your hoe." The silence that followed was so thick you could hear the wind brushing against the trees. I turned to look at her, and sure enough, her face was red, lips pressed so tight they looked like they'd vanish. She stormed up the steps, pointing a manicured finger at me. "This is outrageous. You can't just override the HOA. We have rules. No outdoor fires, no unapproved structures, no livestock, no generators. You'll have to go through us. For every improvement you make, do you understand?" I smiled calmly. "Karen, I don't think you understand. This valley isn't yours to govern anymore. It never was." She froze as if she couldn't process the words. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Her eyes darted from me to the hills behind me, as if realizing for the first time that she was standing on ground she didn't control. I could almost see the panic breaking through her mask of superiority. And I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Now let me pause here and ask you guys a question. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor or an HOA that tried to control things they had no right to? If yes, share your experience in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like the video, because trust me, what's about to unfold in this story is going to leave you stunned. The next morning, the valley was alive with the sounds I had missed for years. Birds calling from the treetops, the gentle rush of the stream in the distance, and the creak of the old porch swing in the wind. I had barely settled back into my cabin when I heard it again, that sharp growl of engines tearing up the dirt road. This time it wasn't just one SUV, 3 vehicles rolled up in formation, like an army convoy. And of course at the front was Karen stepping out with a clipboard in one hand and a smug grin on her face. Behind her came two men in polo shirts with HOA logos stitched neatly on the chest. They looked like mall cops pretending to be soldiers. Karen marched right up to me as I was chopping firewood. "Mr. Owner," she sneered, "if you're really planning to stay here, then you'll need to follow HOA protocols. I've brought our compliance officers to conduct an inspection and ensure your property is up to code." I leaned on the axe handle, raising an eyebrow. "Compliance. Officers. You mean those guys?" She shot me a glare but kept her chin high. "Yes, and they'll be documenting every violation starting with that woodpile. It's too close to your cabin. That's a fire hazard. And that generator, you can't use it. Noise. Restrictions are in place, and don't get me started on your truck parked on the grass. That's a finable offense." I stared at her in disbelief. This was beyond ridiculous. It wasn't just arrogance anymore, it was desperation. Karen was trying to assert control over land that legally wasn't hers to govern. I decided to test her. "So you're saying every move I make has to be approved by you?" "Exactly," she said, lips curling into a triumphant smile. "That's how we keep this community safe and orderly. You can't just run wild out here. Safe and orderly," I repeated slowly. "Tell me, Karen, do you even know who this valley belongs to?" She lifted her chin. "Of course it belongs to the HOA." I laughed and shook my head, then walked over to my truck. I pulled out a weathered leather folder, the one my grandfather had given me years ago. Inside was the deed with his signature, the county seal, and my name clearly marked as the inheritor. I handed it to her. "Here, why don't you take a look?" Karen grabbed the folder, flipping through it. Her smugness faltered for the first time as her eyes scanned the legal text. She swallowed hard before snapping it shut. "That doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "These documents could be outdated. The HOA has been maintaining this valley for years. We've paved roads, set up gates, installed signs. We own the right to manage this area." That's when I noticed something in her voice. It wasn't confidence, it was fear. "Listen," I said firmly, "I'm not here to cause trouble. But this land is mine. I don't need your permission to chop wood, build a fire, or park my truck. So you can either accept that or waste your time fighting a battle you'll lose." Karen's face twisted into a scowl. "Fine," she hissed, "but don't think you can ignore us. We'll be watching. And the first mistake you make will shut you down." With that, she spun on her heel, signaling her little entourage to follow. The 3 SUVs roared back down the valley road, kicking. Up dust I watched them go, knowing this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to walk away quietly. Later that evening I sat on the porch drinking coffee. As the sun set over the hills, I thought about my grandfather, about the stories he used to tell me of fighting tooth and nail to keep this valley safe from developers. He used to say Karen types would always show up sooner or later, people who thought power was theirs to grab if they yelled loud enough. I didn't realize then how right he was. As the stars began to appear, I noticed something odd in the distance. A faint glow coming from the edge of the valley near the road. It wasn't moonlight, it was artificial, like headlights or floodlights. I frowned, set my mug down, and grabbed a flashlight. I hiked through the brush and followed the glow until I came to a small clearing where my jaw dropped. Karen and her HOA crew had set up a portable office trailer right on the border of my property, complete with banners that read, "HOA Checkpoint." They had even placed a chain gate across the dirt road with a fresh padlock, and there, standing proudly like she had conquered new land, was Karen, arms folded, smug as ever. "Tomorrow morning," she said with a smirk, "anyone entering or leaving this valley goes through us. That includes you." I tightened my grip on the flashlight. They were really going to try and blockade my own land. My blood boiled, but deep down I couldn't help but smirk too, because Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her life. This wasn't just about control anymore, this was war. The next morning the valley was unusually loud. Instead of the calm rustle of leaves and chirping birds, I woke up to the metallic clang of hammers, the groan of metal poles, and the shrill bark of orders. I stepped outside, and what I saw made my blood boil overnight. Karen and her crew had set up what looked like a miniature fortress at the valley entrance. A white trailer stood at the roadside, a brand new aluminum gate stretched across the dirt path, and two bright orange cones blocked any vehicle from passing through the trees. I could even see a cheap security camera, mounted on a pole red light blinking like an accusation. And there she was, Karen standing in the middle of it, all holding her clipboard like it was a crown, her. HOA minions buzzed around her, measuring, taping, hammering signs into the dirt. Each one read, HOA property, no trespassing, HOA rules apply. Karen was smiling like a queen surveying her kingdom. I marched down the road, my boots crunching on gravel. She noticed me and her grin widened. Good morning, Mr. Owner. Welcome to your first official day under HOA jurisdiction. I stopped a few feet away, my jaw tight and my fists clenched. Karen, you've crossed the line. You're trespassing on private property. She let out a mocking laugh. Trespassing, please. This is community land. Our records show that this valley is part of the HOA district. Therefore, we have full authority to regulate traffic, protect residents, and enforce our bylaws. I pulled the folder from under my arm and held it up again. You mean these records? The deed is in my name. The county tax office has me listed as the sole owner, and this land has never once been included in your district. Karen's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. Waving a dismissive hand, paperwork can be forged. We'll let the courts decide. Until then, this checkpoint stays. And let me warn you, we charge tolls for maintenance fees. Every vehicle that passes through pays us. My eyes widened in disbelief. You're charging people to drive through my land? She tilted her head, feigning innocence. It's called community contribution. Everyone does their part. Surely you wouldn't want to be the one neighbor who refuses. That was it. I'd had enough. I stepped closer until we were face to face. You listen to me, Karen. You and your little HOA have no power here. I don't owe you a dime. And if you don't tear down this circus by sundown, I'll make sure the sheriff does it for you. Her face turned red, but she forced a smile. Go ahead, call them. You'll see whose side the law takes. Her words stuck in my head because I suddenly realized that might be her plan. She was trying to bait me into a legal battle, one that could drag on for months. Meanwhile, she'd squat on my land acting like she owned it. My grandfather used to warn me about people like this. They don't win by being right. They win by making you too tired to fight. So I changed tactics. Instead of calling the sheriff, I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of everything. The gate, the signs, the trailer, the camera, the men in their polo shirts. Then I looked her dead in the eyes. Thanks, Karen. This is exactly the evidence I needed. For the first time, she looked unsure. What are you talking about? I smiled slowly. Trespassing, operating a business without a permit, illegal blockade of a county road. You've just racked up more violations in one night than I could ever dream of doing in a lifetime. And unlike your HOA rules, the real law actually applies. Her lips pressed tight, but I could see her hand trembling slightly as she gripped her clipboard. I walked away calm on the outside, but inside I was boiling. Karen wasn't just stubborn, she was dangerous, because people like her never back down even when they know they're wrong. Later that day, I drove into town to visit the county clerk's office. I needed to confirm what I already knew. The woman behind the counter recognized my grandfather's name immediately. Ah, the Valley property, she smiled fondly. Your grandfather was very protective of it. Nice to see it's still in the family, I asked her straight out. Has the Valley ever been part of an HOA district? She shook her head firmly. Never. We've had disputes. Before, developers tried to buy it once, but your grandfather fought them off and he won. That land is fully private and always has been. That was the proof I needed. Not only did I have the deed, but I had the county's records on my side. Karen was bluffing, and her bluff was about to cost her. When I drove back toward the cabin, the sun was dipping behind the hills, casting long shadows over the valley. As I approached the checkpoint, I noticed a line of cars backed up. Karen was out there demanding money from each driver. People were arguing, gesturing toward me when they saw my truck approaching. Their faces lit up like they'd spotted rescue. I stopped the truck and got out. Karen's smirk returned. Well, well, look who decided to show up ready to pay your dues. Instead of answering, I held up a stack of papers. The deed, the tax record, the county confirmation. And I raised my voice loud enough for every driver in line to hear, "This land is private property. It has never been part of any HOA. And anyone trying to charge you to pass through is committing fraud." The crowd erupted in gasps. Some drivers even pulled out their phones, recording every second. Karen's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. But before she could speak, one man shouted, "This is extortion, you can't do this, lady." Others joined in, voices rising against her. For once, Karen didn't look like the queen of the valley. She looked cornered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could. "Here, tear it down, Karen. Before I press charges." Her hand shook on the clipboard, but she hissed through her teeth, "This isn't over, not by a long shot." And I believed her, because the way her eyes burned with fury told me she was already planning her next move. The days after the checkpoint showdown were strangely quiet. Too quiet. Karen and her crew had torn down their trailer and dragged the gate away, but I knew it wasn't because they accepted defeat. It was because they were plotting something about... The way she glared at me before leaving made it clear she wasn't done, not by a long shot. At first I thought maybe I'd won. Maybe the evidence I showed had scared her off. But then the little things started happening. My generator, which had been working fine for years, suddenly sputtered out. When I checked the fuel line, it was sliced clean through like someone had taken a knife to it. The next day, I woke up to find broken glass scattered across my driveway, sharp enough to shred my truck. Tires, if I hadn't noticed in time. And on the third morning, my woodpile, the one I'd spent hours chopping, was scattered all over the clearing, logs tossed into the stream, like someone wanted to ruin my supplies. Each incident was small enough that I couldn't prove who did it, but I didn't need proof. I knew. Only Karen had the motive and the arrogance to think she could get away with it. I started keeping my phone on me at all times, recording whenever I went outside. But she was smart, never showing her face directly. Instead, her crew of HOA loyalists started appearing on the edges of my land. They'd park their cars on the roadside, blasting music late at night, or shine high beams toward my cabin windows. They never stepped foot past the boundary, but they wanted me to feel surrounded, to feel hunted. And yet every time I caught them lurking, I'd shout across the trees, "Remember, this is private property. You're the trespassers, not me." But Karen was clever. She knew harassment. Like this was hard to prove, I could feel my patience wearing thin. The valley that was supposed to feel like freedom was turning into a battleground. Then came the boldest move yet. One evening, I hiked up the ridge to watch the sunset. Something my grandfather and I used to do together. The view stretched for miles, hills rolling like waves, and the cabin tucked small and quiet below. But when I turned my head, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Smoke. A thin grey column rising from the direction of my lower pasture. I bolted down the trail, heart hammering. By the time I reached the clearing, flames were licking at dry brush. Someone had set a fire deliberately. I grabbed the water barrels I'd stored for emergencies and doused it before it spread too far, but the smell of smoke clung to the air for hours. My valley nearly burned because of them. That night, as I sat on the porch staring into the dark, I knew one thing: I couldn't play defense anymore. Karen wasn't just trying to annoy me. She wanted to drive me out. If she couldn't control the valley, she'd destroy it. So I started thinking like my grandfather. He used to say, when people attack your home, you don't just protect it. You remind them whose ground they're standing on. The next morning, I drove into town and pulled every record I could find at the county office. Not just the deed, but the historical maps, the surveys, the old court filings. My grandfather had kept meticulous records of every dispute and every victory. Developers, HOAs, nosy neighbors, all of them had tried to carve a piece of this valley for themselves, and all of them had failed. Every single paper had one thing in common: my family name. I made copies and bound them into a thick folder. Then I did something bold. I marched straight into the HOA clubhouse. The place was buzzing with people sipping coffee, reading newsletters, and whispering like bees in a hive. When I walked through the door, the chatter died. "Karen, was at the front speaking to a small crowd about community preservation. She froze when she saw me. I strode to the podium, slammed the folder down, and said loud enough for every ear in the room, "This valley is not yours. It never was. Here's every document proving my ownership, and every failed attempt by this HOA to claim otherwise. Anyone who tells you different is lying." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face went pale, but she forced a laugh. "Don't listen to him. These are old records. The HOA has jurisdiction." One of the residents in the back piped up. "Then why is his name on all the county files? Why are we paying dues for land that doesn't belong to us?" Others murmured, nodding. Some even pulled out their phones. Snapping pictures of the documents I had brought Karen, tried to shush them, tried to regain control, but the seed of doubt was planted, and nothing scared her more than losing her grip on the people she ruled. I leaned closer to her, whispering so only she could hear, "You wanted a war, Karen. Well, you've got one, and this time you're outnumbered." Her hands shook around her clipboard, eyes blazing with fury. But she didn't lash out. Not here. Not in front of her followers. Instead, she hissed, "Through clenched teeth, you'll regret this." I turned and walked out, head held high. For the first time, I felt like I'd struck back instead of just defending myself. But deep down, I knew Karen was a cornered animal now. And cornered animals don't retreat quietly. They attack harder. That night, as I bolted the cabin door and double-checked the windows, I could almost hear her voice in the wind, a promise whispered through the trees. This isn't over, and I believed it. The week after I exposed Karen inside her own clubhouse felt like the calm before a storm. The harassment stopped. No late-night headlights, no smashed glass, no sabotage, at least not right away. It was unsettling, like Karen had vanished into the shadows, waiting, plotting. I kept busy repairing the damage she had caused, patching up the generator, rebuilding the woodpile, and clearing the scorched brush from the fire. But every swing of the axe and every step across the land felt heavy, like I was being watched. And on a Thursday morning, I found out what she had been planning. I was hauling water from the stream when I heard engines again, but this time it wasn't just SUVs. It was an entire convoy led by a county truck with flashing lights. Behind it came Karen in her pristine black SUV, followed by a caravan of HOA members, their cars polished like parade floats. My stomach sank. Out stepped two county officials, clipboards in hand, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy. Karen strutted beside them, practically glowing with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced, voice loud enough to echo across the valley. "Today we are reclaiming what belongs to the community. This valley has been mismanaged for years, but under HOA oversight, it will finally be safe, organized, and profitable." Profitable. That one word told me everything. Karen wasn't fighting for community. She was fighting for money, development contracts, fees, kickbacks. This wasn't about preserving the valley. It was about carving it up and selling it piece by piece. One of the officials adjusted his glasses and approached me. "We've received a complaint, sir. Multiple claims that you are occupying this property unlawfully and violating county codes for habitation, without approval. We're here to conduct an inspection." Karen smirked behind him, arms folded, as if she had already won. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice calm. "Gentlemen, I own this valley. The deed is in my name and has been in my family. For generations, you can check your own records. The county clerk will confirm it." The deputy stepped forward, arms crossed. "We'll need to see that paperwork." I pulled the folder from under my arm, the same one I'd carried for weeks, and handed it over. The official flipped through the pages, slowly, carefully. When he reached the survey maps, he frowned, tapping his pen against the paper. Karen stepped closer, feigning innocence. "Is there a problem?" The man shook his head slowly. "No problem. These documents are legitimate. They match the records at the clerk's office. This land is private and has never been incorporated into an HOA district." The look on Karen's face was priceless. Her smirk collapsed. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw raw panic flash across her expression, but just as quickly she recovered, shaking her head and waving her hand. "This paperwork is outdated. The HOA has invested in this valley for 2 decades. That gives us authority. The official closed the folder and handed it back to me. I'm afraid that's not how property law works, Mum. Investment doesn't equal ownership. Unless you can produce a deed, this land belongs solely to him. The crowd of HOA members began murmuring. Some looked confused, others angry. A few even embarrassed. Karen's jaw clenched. She turned on the crowd, voice rising. Don't you see he's lying? He'll destroy everything we've built here. He doesn't care about community. One man shouted back from the group. Then, why are our dues so high, Karen? Where's all that money going? More voices joined in echoing doubts. Karen's perfect grip on her followers was slipping right before her eyes. She tried to regain control, waving her clipboard like a weapon. He's manipulating you. This isn't over. I'll take this to court. I'll take it to the state if I have to. The official finally raised his hand. That's enough, ma'am. Unless you can present valid ownership claims, you have no authority here. And if you continue interfering, we'll consider this trespassing. Karen's face turned red as the deputy gave her a warning look. For the first time, she looked small-cornered, stripped of her power. But I knew Karen well enough to understand. This wasn't the end. Sure enough, as the officials and the deputy packed up, Karen stormed over to me. You think you've won, she hissed. You think a few papers will stop me. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I leaned in close enough for only her to hear. No, Karen, you have no idea who you're dealing with. This valley isn't just land, it's legacy, and I'll defend it with everything I've got. Her eyes narrowed like daggers, but she turned away, stomping back to her SUV. Tires screeched as she sped down the dirt road, her loyalists trailing behind like lost sheep. The valley fell quiet again, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like the eye of a hurricane. That night, I sat on the porch, staring out at the dark mountains beyond the HOA stars. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice, calm and steady. This is your fight now, boy, and you don't give ground. I knew Karen wasn't done, not after being humiliated twice in front of her people. No, she'd be back, and next time she'd strike harder than ever, and when she did, I'd be ready. The valley had never felt more alive after the officials left. Birds seemed to sing louder. The stream sounded clearer, even the air felt lighter. But I knew it was temporary. That peace was fragile like glass. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was the type to reload and come back harder. And I was right. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of engines again, but this time it wasn't just a few SUVs. It was a fleet, trucks, vans, even a flatbed trailer hauling equipment. Floodlights snapped on, drenching the trees in harsh white light. Voices echoed through megaphones, rise and shine. HOA members, we're taking back the valley. I threw on my boots and ran outside. And there she was, Karen standing tall on the back of the flatbed. Her face twisted with fury. She looked more like a general leading soldiers than a neighbor. All around her, HOA members swarmed, carrying fences, tools, and rolls of chain link. They were trying to build a wall around my cabin. This is your final warning. Karen, I shouted, you're trespassing. Get off my land. She laughed bitter and sharp. You don't get it. This valley belongs to us. We've poured money into it for years. We've earned it. You can wave your papers all you want, but tonight we reclaim. Here the crowd cheered. Some nervously, some with blind loyalty, and then the first post slammed into the ground. My heart pounded, but I didn't panic because I had been preparing for this. Ever since the county officials confirmed my ownership, I had spent days gathering every bit of evidence, every recording, every photo, every sabotage Karen had done. I had even installed my own cameras around the cabin hidden in the trees, and tonight I was ready to use it. I raised my phone and pressed a button. Instantly, floodlights I had mounted earlier lit up the cabin yard. Cameras blinked red as they streamed live directly to the county sheriff's office and to an online feed I had set up. This wasn't just my word against Karen's anymore. The whole world could see. Karen froze, blinking against the light. What is this evidence? I called out. Every fire you set, every piece of property you damaged, every time you trespassed. I've recorded it all. And right now the sheriff is watching, and so is every resident in town. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones buzzed as notifications started popping up. HOA members were seeing the live feed on social media. Karen's smug mask cracked, her eyes darting as people whispered around her. One man shouted, "Wait a second. She told us he was squatting, but he owns the land." Another woman added, "My dues went up last year to cover valley maintenance." "Where did that money go?" Karen. Karen's face twisted. She waved her clipboard like a sword. "Don't listen to him, he's manipulating you, he's—" A new set of headlights cut through the night. A county sheriff's truck rolled up, dust swirling. The deputy from before stepped out, hand resting on his belt. His voice was calm but firm. "All right. Folks, that's enough. Step away from the property." The crowd hesitated, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Karen tried to rally them. "Don't stop. We have the right." But the deputy shook his head. "No, ma'am, you don't. I've seen the deed, I've seen the county records. And now I've seen the footage. You're trespassing on private land. You and your associates need to leave immediately or face arrest." Silence fell heavy, complete. Karen's followers looked at one another, unease written on their faces. Some started backing away, slipping into their cars, headlights blinking on one by one. The army she had built began crumbling before her eyes. Karen screamed at them, "Cowards! Don't you dare leave. This is our land." But no one listened. Finally, she turned to me, eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't fair. You don't deserve this place. You don't even live here. You'll never love it like I do." I stepped forward, meeting her glare. "This valley isn't about power or money, Karen. It's about respect, something you'll never understand." Her face contorted one last time before the deputy stepped between us. "That's enough, ma'am. You're under arrest for trespassing, harassment, and attempted fraud." He gestured to the patrol car, Karen's. Jaw dropped as the reality hit her, but the deputy didn't wait. He guided her toward the car as she kicked and screamed, clipboard finally slipping from her grasp into the dirt. I stood there, chest heaving, as the convoy of HOA cars vanished into the night, leaving the valley quiet once more. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt right. The cabin, the trees, the stream all seemed to breathe with me. The next morning, I sat on the porch watching the sunrise pour gold over the hills. The Igi Valley was mine again, not just on paper but in truth. No gates, no checkpoints, no fake rules, just the land as it had always been, free and untamed. And as I sipped my coffee, I thought about my grandfather, about how he would have smiled to see me. "Fight for this place," I whispered into the morning air. "I kept my promise, Grandpa. I didn't let them take it." The valley echoed back in silence, but it felt like an answer. And deep down, I knew one thing for certain: Karen might be gone, but the valley would always stand. The land remembers who defends it, and tonight it remembered me.